This morning, 4 innocent Israelis safely back home with their families after being kidnapped by brutal Hamas terrorists and held hostage in Gaza for 8 months. The daring IDF rescue carried out in a densely populated refugee camp where the hostages were held in the homes of civilians. Joining us now, former IDF spokesperson Jonathan Conricus, also a former lieutenant colonel in the IDF. Sir, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
For our audience, how did this go down?
Well, it went down after weeks of planning, collecting intelligence from various sources, including doing preparations and operations in order to gather intelligence on the ground, which then finally allowed Israeli commandos, the elite of the elite Israeli special forces, to understand where they were being held and then to launch an operation that basically hit 2 locations. And the key thing was to do it simultaneously. The underlying assumption was that if Israel hits one place where Noah or the other place where the 3 men were being held, if we don't do it simultaneously, the risks for the lives of the other location or the hostages being held in the other location were very high. So it had to be simultaneously. Israeli troops were able to infiltrate without being noticed. And
so this means they were wearing civilian clothes. I mean, they didn't come in a military formation.
No, they didn't advertise their advance ahead of time, and they surprised the Hamas guards and the civilian sentries that Hamas has deployed along the area. They got to the locations, burst in. Unfortunately, in one of the locations, an Israeli Special Forces soldier was severely wounded. He later died of his wounds, which is a terrible loss for Israel. He is a real bona fide hero. His name was Arnon, and the operation is now named after him. He was the leader of the counterterrorism unit. And what the Israeli troops did was go in simultaneously, get the hostages out. And the more difficult part became actually the vehicle exfiltration. And this is a very densely populated area, very small alleys, lots and lots of people around it. And what basically happened was that one of the vehicles got stuck. And when they got stuck, they came under tremendous fire. I'm talking massive machine gun fire, RPG, rockets. It was a really intense situation. That is also where I think most of the Palestinian casualties that we see the Palestinians touting on international media, and it gets a lot of attention of the amount of Palestinian casualties. Most of them were in that area where Israeli troops came under a lot of fire with the hostages in the vehicle. And then finally, thanks to an envelope of fire and the Israeli soldiers fighting their way out, made their way towards the coast where 2 helicopters awaited. And the first helicopter took Noah to safety, and then the second helicopter took the other force with the 3 Israeli hostages out.
It's incredible. You mentioned weeks of planning. I even read that they built a mock-up of a couple of these apartment rooms. I mean, that's how sophisticated this was in their desire to get inside quickly.
Yes, and that is the level of detail that they had to have in order to have any chance of success.
And that must be a reflection of serious real-time intelligence that they're... does that mean the Israelis have somewhat of a sense where most of the hostages might be held?
Sadly, I don't think it does.
Really?
This was made possible because Hamas decided to jail these hostages and to have them above ground in a civilian-populated area. And we've seen this in the past. This isn't the first time that Hamas jails Israeli civilians in a civilian Palestinian environment, and where, by the way, the people who were guarding and forcing the Israeli civilians to stay there were Palestinian civilians. It's all a civilian situation here, but many other Israeli hostages are presumed to be held underground in specially defended Hamas compounds, with instructions for the Hamas guards there that as soon as you hear any kind of IDF activity, you execute the Israeli hostages. And that is, of course, the main scenario that Israel wants to prevent. There have been successful Israeli raids in the past. In Rafah, about 3 months ago, Israeli forces, again, were able to go in unnoticed and save 2 Israeli men, civilians, who were taken from the kibbutzim.
What does this tell you about the strength of Hamas at this? Because this is an area that's been cleared, but it's not fully cleared, obviously.
Correct.
You mentioned sentries. Those are civilians that have walkie-talkies, and they're willing to give a heads up to Hamas if something looks suspicious. Are they reconstituting in places where you can't have Israeli troops all the time?
So what we know that they're doing is that with hostages, they've been moving them around. These hostages that were now saved, they were in different locations, and they tell Israeli soldiers and intel officers after they were saved that we were moved around, and that is what Hamas has been doing with the other hostages as well, to make it as difficult as possible for Israel to actually get in. They've been shifting them around.
Move around in civilian populations is the strategy.
In civilian population, in civilian houses, sometimes underground, sometimes above ground, with the full knowledge and complicity, and in many cases, active participation of Gazan Palestinian civilians. And that's a very important point, because, you know, what Hamas does by its strategy is constantly to muddle the line between what's military and what's civilian. And they always try to, you know, all of their fighters, they're dressed in civilian clothes.
Sure, and then they tout them as civilian casualties.
Exactly.
And try to
then they get reported as such in international
media. To the international press.
Yeah.
I want to get your comment as well, because there were some anti-Israel protesters surrounding the White House. They defaced some monuments. They're calling out genocide, Joe, chanting, you know, you're a sellout, pack your bags and get the hell out, smearing red paint on Andrew Jackson. I mean, if these protesters are really angry at Joe Biden's approach to what's going on in Israel. What's your take?
So I've been at protests like these around the world, not only in the US. I've seen them in Scandinavia, I've seen them in other parts of Europe, I've seen them in the UK, and I've seen them here in the US. The common denominator that I see is a lot of hatred towards the West, a lot of anti-American sentiment. Sure, the Jews and Israel are front and center of most of the vicious rhetoric here and most of the hatred. But what I see is a bunch of people who do not respect American values, who do not respect Western values, and are very bloodthirsty towards Israel. What I'm concerned is that more and more of public domain is slowly but surely being conquered by this type of people. Anarchists who have no respect for the past and who stop at nothing in order to get their messages across.
Real quick, just is Israel given the ability to actually take out Hamas? Is America holding back Israel from finishing the fight?
I think that Israel would likely want to fight harder and faster. And I think that Israel should be doing that. And I think that it would be in the interest of Israelis and Palestinians to get the job done faster and quicker, to get the suffering done. And I think Israel can and should be doing it.
We shall see. Well, Jonathan Conricus, thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Great stuff.